Looks to me like a very interesting book, but I'm curious. You say this is an epidemic. How do we know there's an epidemic? What's the epidemic thing? Is that something new?
Well, have you noticed that most of the kids today are wearing braces, or they have crowding of their teeth somewhat? And also, I don't know if you've noticed that, or if you're aware that a lot of people that you know have sleeping problems. And many people now sleep with CPAPs and machines that help them breathe better at night.
Well, yeah, is this somehow related to, I've heard about the need for a sleeping revolution. Some people claim sleeping is a big problem. Is this connected to that?
Absolutely. And jaws that are too small are also an indicator
of something. And of course, obviously as a biologist, is either an indicator of lousy jaw development. But why should our jaw development be lousy?
Well, because there's a lot of habits that we've developed since we became industrialized, since we started eating processed foods, and even when we started the agricultural revolution, we started eating softer things, so we're not chewing as hard as we could, and this relates to the jaws not growing to their full potential.
Well, look, as an interviewer, I have to ask you, what difference does it make whether, I mean, why did jaws not grow to their full potential? Isn't it true that if you didn't let a baby ever walk, that they'd be just fine at the age of 12 when you set them out to run a race?
Obviously not. If a baby didn't walk for 12 years, when you want them to walk, their legs would be underdeveloped. The bones wouldn't even grow.
It's ridiculous when you get right down to it that people don't immediately see that if their kids don't chew enough.
Yeah, we're not breastfeeding as much as we should. We're giving the kids passive liquid, and then we're weaning them into very, very soft mush, and so their jaws are not getting the workout that they need.
Well, why would breastfeeding make a difference? I mean, in the bottle or a breast, the same thing?
No, when a baby breastfeeds, they have to use their muscles to suction the milk. It's work. Some babies even sweat when they're breastfeeding, and when you deliver the milk through a bottle that just comes through a hole, it's like feeding drinking water from a fire hose for a baby.
This is something that we see all the time. People don't pay any attention, which is what has surprised to me in getting to this issue, is we have this gigantic literature on the nutritional content of food, but almost nothing on how we eat it and how it exercises us. I mean, a lot of my friends and my daughter's friends, actually being working mothers, tended to use a breast pump so they could then leave the milk home with a bottle with the baby, and they're missing, from what you've told me, they're missing a very important part of the kid's development, even though they think they're doing exactly the right thing.
That is exactly what happened to me. I was a working mother, so I thought I was doing the right thing because the chemical composition of the breast milk was there. It was the perfect food for my baby, but the delivery system wasn't there. And I was not aware of this, and that's why my own children didn't develop properly. Because after that, we weaned them into very soft foods because we were afraid they might choke. And then they start choosing very soft foods like hamburgers and macaroni and cheese and things that hardly need any chewing. So their muscles are not getting the exercise that they need.
It's happening to me still. Very rarely do I go to a restaurant, get a haunch of beef, bite onto it, use a knife to sniff it out, and so on. But what difference does it make? I mean, who the hell really cares, except for the fact that you don't look as good? If your teeth are pointing in all different directions, you can still eat.
Well, you can eat, but we are finding out now that there's more and more children and young people having that crowding, that does have a health impact because the airway gets impacted. And as we straighten those teeth, sometimes,
what the hell is an airway?
Airway
Have you got an airway? Have I got an airway?
Yes, it's the space behind your tongue where the air passes into the lungs. That's the airway. And if it's a very small space, it's like breathing through a cocktail straw as opposed to a fire hose. You imagine yourself having to breathe through a cocktail straw. That's difficult, and it's challenging, and it will cause stress to your body. where if you have a big fire hose and you're breathing comfortably.
How does it cause stress to your body? Just the additional work, or?
No, sometimes you don't get as much oxygen as your brain needs, as your body needs. And eventually, if there's no room for your tongue, as we get older and we lose some muscle tone, your tongue just relaxes into your throat. And that's when we start snoring. And the next step after somebody's snoring is to have your airway cut off completely. And that's what we call sleep apnea, which is people that stop breathing at night. And it's actually very dangerous.
Yeah, I've heard something about that from other interviewees, but tell us a little bit about sleep apnea, a little more detail. What actually happens?
Well, there's different types of sleep apnea. The one that we're concerned with is what we call obstructive sleep apnea. Obstructive means there's something in the way of the airway. Let's say we have a tube, the air has to go through there, and we have something that either blocks that tube or partially blocks it. When you snore, you have it partially blocked. When you have sleep apnea, it's fully blocked.
So snoring is basically a bad symptom. I've heard somebody told me that there was more and more snoring in kids. Is that true?
Yeah, we even have babies now that are snoring. And parents are not aware that this is a red flag. And
it's not cute.
No, and they should be alarmed and they should address this. There's not a lot of ways that doctors address this. The one thing they do is they take out the tonsils, the adenoids. I don't know if you've heard of this, but that helps kids breathe better. But that's only taking care of the symptom. It's not taking care of the cause itself. So
the cause could be a blocked nose. It could be just not enough chewing.
Well, there's already enough research that, it has been done at Stanford, and, we cite it heavily in our book in JAWS. But there's research that has already shown that the enlarged adenoids and tonsils, and these are the tissue that you see when you open your mouth, and sometimes you see big inflamed areas at the back of your throat, and those are secondary to mouth breathing. That means if you have a stuffy nose, your nose is not filtering, which is part of the job of the nose. So your throat has to develop something to filter pollution and allergens and dust and all kinds of things that are in our environment. So what happens is the tonsils get big, and that's the first sign for babies to start snoring, because there's not enough room, because this barrier of defense is enlarging.
So let's suppose you got a baby and it's had its adenoids out, but it's obviously the need to take out the adenoids was a warning to you as a parent that there was something wrong. What further could be done to help the baby?
Well, we need to help these babies learn to breathe through their nose. Babies, when they're born, they're naturally nose breathers, and they develop the mouth breathing habit for a reason. And we don't really know exactly what the reason is, but we can, as parents, help stimulate nose breathing. And it's very interesting. We cited also in our book in JAWS in the 1800s. We already knew about this. There's an author, Catlin, that lived with American Indians, and he investigated why American Indians were so healthy. They had very low mortality rate for their children, and so he lived with them, and he observed that the mothers, the new mothers, when they were breastfeeding their children, when they were done, they would close their mouth for a few seconds lightly, so that the babies will continue nose breathing. So there's a lot of different techniques that we can utilize to convince or guide the babies to have a healthier
I love this book because I'm the junior author of it, but I think one of the most interesting thing is we reprinted some pictures from Catlin's book of something like 1840 or 45 or something, where he talks about the Indians calling us black mouths because our mouths were always open, and the title of his book was "Close Your Mouth and Save Your Life." We discovered this epidemic, but Catlin, way back when, had the right idea, basically. And in fact, the death rate there's signs that the death rate among Europeans then was higher in North America than among the Indians that were not in contact with Europeans.
The reason that he got involved in doing this research is because he was sent by the medical system back then. They wanted to understand why the whites living in the frontier would have so many of their children die early. And the American Indians hardly had any. And we know that because we haven't really found, evidence of them having a lot of children buried.
In their graveyards, there's a very low frequency compared with Europeans of babies and young children.
So he started in this journey to find out what the whites could do to get healthier. And interestingly, he called his book "Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life." So the title was so. He found that this
we'd
was
have stolen
so
that title if we hadn't run into Jaws.
Absolutely. But it just shows how important he thought it was, and he wasn't the only one that was aware of this. There's a lot of sites in the literature that proves that society knew that it was important to close your mouth.
But society now supports a lot of orthodontists who apparently are not aware of this and would probably say we're out of our minds. If I come to you as an orthodontist, or you could come to me as an orthodontist and say, how can you possibly know this stuff? I mean, what evidence is there to support your view?
Well, orthodontists are inherently very good. They're trying to help their patients. But the system is not driven towards health, towards looking at the patient in a holistic way. It's driven to look at the specific problem or symptom, which is the teeth. And few orthodontists, we're starting to realize that straighten the teeth should make the patient healthier. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And there's techniques that will help you get straighter teeth, but by enlarging your jaws. And you can do this most effectively before 10 years old.
But there were no orthodontists at all 300 years ago, or with hunter-gatherers. And when we look, I mean, it's a very famous scientist at Harvard named Lieberman, who's looked at this, or the best human paleontologist, Richard Klein at Stanford, all say there was no crooked teeth back when you were hunter-gatherers, essentially. This is something that has developed in the last 100 to 200 to 300 years. So there, I think, is some pretty good evidence, unless you can find fossil orthodontists that were among the hunter-gatherers in straightening their teeth. They didn't really need it, which is, I think, an excellent bit of evidence that the problem is not the crooked teeth per se, it's the jaw too small. And that comes from the things that we do differently from what the hunter-gatherers did.
Yeah, one of the big questions that we have is when we see somebody with a problem like crowding of the teeth or the need to have wisdom teeth removed, if this is something genetic that they inherit from their parents, or is it something that is a result of the environment that they've lived in. And the more we look into this, we realize that the small jaws and the crowding is an environmental problem that can be addressed by changing minor habits.
As an evolutionist, it always drives me nuts to read stuff that says, oh, well, the reason this person has crooked teeth is they had a mother with crooked teeth, with tiny teeth, and the father with big teeth, and the mix doesn't really work well. Would you not advise a beautiful, slender young woman to marry a football halfback because they're afraid that she will end up with very, very broad shoulders and tiny little legs or something? People have to understand DNA is not the entire story. It cannot be separated from the environment. And people in today's world where they see all this DNA stuff, which is important. In other words, you can't have an organism without DNA or the equivalent. You also can't have an organism without the environment that DNA is designed to operate in. And it's crystal clear in this case that the big thing we've changed is not the DNA over time in terms of the jaw development and so on. It's the environment in which it develops. There are other cases where we see DNA has changed in response to the environment. A classic case is with the lactose problems with people that actually evolved different DNA in cultures that were herding cultures and drank milk all the time. But scientists always have to look at both factors, and in this case, in the vast majority of cases, malocclusion, bad bite, crooked teeth, malocclusion is the technical term, is largely due to the change of environment, the many changes in the environment that we made when we became industrialized.
Well, it's already been quite clear. Dr. John Mew from London, he's done identical twin studies, and as we know, and he's not the only one that has done those studies, but we've seen identical twins that have different size of jaws, different malocclusion, and they have exactly the same genes. So if their teeth are different, and their environment has been different, because maybe one twin was, guided toward closing its mouth, where the other twin kept the mouth open, and we can see the development of the jaw is completely different. So that's clear evidence that it's really the environment that controls the size of the
There's
jaws.
all kinds of other evidence. Like in one generation, if an individual moves from a traditional diet into an industrialized diet, you can see the difference in the shape of the face, the appearance. In fact, it generally tends to reduce our judgment of good looking when you have the wrong industrial environment for the development of the jaws. And there's a whole new approach to orthodontics called Forwardontics, as I understand it, which emphasizes on getting the growth of the jaw forward and expanded, where John Mew and other people, and you, I believe, also, have managed to basically cure this problem, which takes a cooperation by the patient, but at the same time, you can, particularly in young people, redirect jaw growth to solve the problem of crooked teeth by solving the basic cause, not just moving the teeth around and putting them in a place where you have to, I believe, use the thing called a retainer to keep them from moving back.
Absolutely. We've basically come up with a new term called forwardontics to try to emphasize the forward part of the treatment that we do. So basically, it's a treatment that has three ideas. One of them is we don't rearrange the teeth to fit the current face or the current jaw, but we rearrange the face and the jaw to be able to allow space for every tooth to be in the mouth, including the wisdom teeth. But it also has, the second important part is that we look into the cause of what caused the problem. So we find out what the habits are, and if there's a habit of the mouth being dropped open or a habit of being slouched all the time, we address that. So we guide the patient to change the habits that created the problem. So then you don't have to retain the teeth, because whatever caused the problem is now gone. So we have to...
I hope some people are watching the picture that they got on the screen now that shows before and after, and how much you can change somebody's appearance and the arrangement of their teeth by fooling with the jaws. One of the reasons we called the book Jaws rather than Teeth is that the emphasis on teeth is wrong. The emphasis has to be on the jaws. And when people understand that, I think they'll take different problems to orthodontists. And orthodontists are certainly in a position to do the right thing once they understand the problem properly.
Yeah, we definitely, we need an army of parents to be dragging their young children to the orthodontist and requesting and demanding that the things that are going wrong are stopped early from continuing to get wrong, as opposed to taking their kids, later, once all the teeth are crowded and all the teeth are in a bad position and jaws are already small, to take them to have the teeth pulled out and straightened. We need to have them, go early and demand that their children are healed.
Because as an interviewer, of course, I've interviewed many people on health issues, and I'm very conscious of these things. But when I took my young kids to the orthodontist, because they did have starting problems, they always said to me, wait till they're 15 because you'll be wasting your money. And I think what you're telling me is I shouldn't have waited till they're 15.
Well, you won't probably wait till 15, but the ideal age for the orthodontist is around 11 or 12 years old, when all the permanent teeth, other than the wisdom teeth, have erupted. That's the
Erupted? You mean blown up?
No, I mean they're in the mouth. The baby teeth are gone, and the grown-up teeth
Have come out of the gums.
Yeah. So this is the ideal, the easiest time to straighten the teeth, to just deal with the symptom, and that's why as a science or as a group we've started doing that and just helping kids when the teeth are there. And to be able to prevent something that's not a problem yet or it's not evident is always harder. And this is why we are calling for parents to demand treatment, because the doctors are not going to be, suggesting this, because it takes a lot of cooperation, both from the parent and the child, to change a habit, in any habit. If you bite your fingernails or you suck your thumb or you smoke, any habit is hard to break. So we have a series of exercises that have to be done by the parent with the child every single day for months and months. So it's something that the parents need to be aware of and work with their children to change their overall health.
Well, look, I have a beautiful, cute little 4-year-old. How the hell would I know whether that 4-year-old is going to develop with a beautiful set of complete teeth with no wisdom teeth and so on, and a beautiful smile and so forth, or end up looking like a wreck? I mean, in the book we have some nice examples there.
I was going to say, pick up a copy of the book.
Yeah.
And go through the symptoms of,
Well, tell the audience some of the symptoms.
Yeah, well, some of the symptoms are obviously if your child smiles and shows too much gum, if when you watch your child when he's concentrating, he or she is concentrating in something else like TV, or if their mouth is hanged open and the lips are not sealed properly, or if when they're asleep they move around and their sleep is not restful. If they wake up in the morning,
often tired. Is that?
Yeah, they wake up in the morning tired. A child should really sleep well and should wake up with a lot of energy very early. If they're not doing that, I'm not saying this is the only thing that might be a problem, because electronic use and stuff like that is affecting children's sleep too. But a child that's breathing properly should sleep properly. And a child that has attention problems, or it's tired during the day, energy problems, that's a symptom.
Or if you hear the kids snore.
Or snoring, or tossing and turning at night a lot. The restful
Can you
sleep.
tell my wife, at least with my kids, I used to be able to tell how they were sleeping by how much the covers were messed up.
Yeah. Well, you don't want the covers to be too messed up.
Yeah, no, I mean it. That's right, because they're squirming around.
Exactly, and that's not restful sleep. And those are, some of the symptoms of their behavior, their behavioral symptoms. But you have also physical symptoms. Another symptom that I like to point out is when your child looks at you. If you see too much of the white under their eyes, it means their mouth is growing down, their jaws are growing down.
The long face syndrome, which is dentists call it.
Yeah, and we know for over a century that kids that have adenoids, we orthodontists call them adenoid faces. If they can't breathe properly, their face just grows long. And
so you're something that we emphasize in the book, and that the people that you're broadcasting to should understand, is that this isn't airy-fairy stuff. You change your behavior a little bit, you can actually see the bones changing. People, for example, don't understand that the upper jaw also is separate bones from the skull, and that you can manipulate the upper jaw and the lower jaw, either for good or for bad. And if I understand it correctly, Forwardontics is manipulating it for good, because it's keeping the whole thing from pressing on your airway so you can't breathe properly.
Yeah, well, what happens is that the jaws are free-floating and developing when we're little. And so if the lower jaw is too far down, the upper will come down to meet it. So the face will tend to get longer. And as it gets longer, because it hinges in the back, it will leave less space at the back of your throat for your tongue.
People have the idea that bones are like cement. And in fact, standard orthodontia tells you that's not true. That what you basically do is, as a standard thing to straighten the teeth either properly or improperly, is to move the tooth through the bone. And the bone develops behind it and gives way in front of it. But if you then stop putting the braces on or whatever, the tooth is back to sort of free floating if the structure of the jaw doesn't hold it in the right place. That's why so many kids after braces have retainers. The retainer is just basically putting some cement in, the equivalent of cement, to keep the teeth from doing their natural moving around in a jaw that isn't the right size and configuration for them.
Go out in the street and observe children just watching TV or waiting at a soccer game and sitting in the bench. You will see that most kids have their mouth open. And that is the clear sign that jaws are not going to grow well. And we know that we are social beings. We learn by watching the people in our community. So if all the kids have the mouth open, then we think that's normal. And sometimes the dad has a long face and the grandfather has a long face and the uncle has a long face, and we expect our child to have a long face. But it might be that all these people in the family had that environment where they were breathing through their mouth, and that's how they grew. That doesn't mean that it's genetic, because it's in everybody in the family. So if we go out in the street, let's observe, and you'll be incredibly surprised to see that most kids and adults just stand there with their mouth open.
There's also some experimental evidence of this, experiments that neither Sandra or I would get involved in now, but they were done a long time ago, in which they simply stuffed the noses of rhesus monkeys. And when the monkeys' noses were stuffed, the young rhesus monkeys, their jaws went to hell. And there are a whole series of experiments showing just how where the tongue is held, or whether you're nose breathing or not, using monkeys, showing that you can very easily change the jaw development in very bad directions simply by changing the way the animal breathes, whether it's through its nose or through its mouth, and how it holds its mouth.
I'd like to explain it to the
We got good pictures of that in the book, too.
Yeah.
And by the way, all the huge royalties coming from the 10 million sales of this book are going into solving these problems, not into our pockets.
Yeah, one of the ways we explain it to children is we tell them that the nose is up here and the mouth is up here. So the top of the mouth, the roof of the mouth, is the floor of the nose. So we always say use it or lose it. If you breathe through your mouth mostly, then that cavity is going to get bigger. If you breathe through your nose, then that is going to get bigger. So if you breathe through your mouth, then your mouth will be big, but your nose will work less and less. And your face will be longer, and everything will be narrower. If you only breathe through your nose, then your mouth will be wider, and your face will be wider.
And also, you want to remember the nose is not just the opening to the airway. It's designed to warm the air, very, very important, because human beings invaded all kinds of environments where the air is too cold, really, to go directly into the lungs, like in the eastern United States right now, an uninhabitable area for us Californians. But it's also designed to filter out, as Sandra already mentioned, dust and allergens and poisons and so on. And it adds certain things that are antibacterial. And it even adds one of the ingredients of Viagra for you guys who are worried about too much mouth breathing. It's really important to breathe through your nose.
Absolutely, and we always tell the kids, we ask them if they would ever eat through their nose. And most children, even little ones, would say, no, why would I eat through my nose? And then we say, well, then don't breathe through your mouth. Your nose is for breathing, your mouth is for eating and talking. And as I said, we're social learners. So if we think of a few changes that we can fight for in society for our children to be healthier, is to have daycares where children are taught what the right way to breathe is, the right way to sit and to have a good posture to grow better. And if we do it earlier and we do it in a group of kids, then we will see less crowding of teeth. We will see this epidemic of snorers and sleep apnea reversed, and all the other things that come with not having enough oxygen get to your brain while you're developing.
And one of the things that I think we need to emphasize as much as possible is that all of this stuff seems sort of casual, and are you breathing right and so on. Sleep apnea, waking you up in the middle of the night, whether you know it or not, is extremely stressful. And when you look at the literature, what are the things we connect now more and more with stress? We connect cancer with stress. We connect heart disease with stress. We connect all kinds of things like depression and ADHD and so on with stress. There's even some connections coming up now with Alzheimer's disease. So this isn't casual. This is a entryway into a whole series of the most serious problems, the health problems that we're facing more and more in industrialized societies. So don't say, oh, well, who cares whether my kid is sleeping well or a little bit tired? The fact that they're a little bit tired could be heading them towards an early death of from cancer, for example. We don't know. Wish we did know more, and the people who work hard with stress are trying to find out. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the data that we would like to have to really know how to scare you, but we have more than enough to scare us and many of our friends. I personally have a daughter and several close friends on CPAP machines, and that's a sign of how seriously we take it.
Well, I couldn't have said it better. A lot of our colleagues and friends ask me, what does an evolutionary biologist have to do with writing this book? And there's nobody that understands what can put humanity at risk better than somebody like you. And I think it is definitely scary, and it's something that if we're informed, we can do so much about. There's so many things that we can't really do much, but this is a thing that we can fix fairly easily just by being aware and practicing some common sense.
And persuading more and more scientists to be broader in their views and to work together. Sandra and I met in large part because of her interest in conservation. And we became social friends through somebody who's now a friend of both Sandra and David and Ann and I. I have the long-term interest in overall in public health. She has a long-term interest in conservation. When we got talking about these things, it just became obvious that we had a common cause here, a major public health problem and related to a whole series of other problems. So try and encourage all health professionals to take a broad view and to particularly look towards prevention. This is a very good example, this whole problem of where it's a hell of a lot easier to prevent it than it is to fix it once you've got it.
Yeah, a forwardontic practitioner will look at a child that is 4 or 5 years old and think about the 20 teeth that this child has in his mouth, but it will also think about the other 32 teeth that need to have room to come in. A lot of people come up to me and say, oh, my dentist said I need to have my wisdom tooth taken out. What can I do? There's not much you can do at that time. But that wisdom tooth has a job, and that job is to maintain a patent airway, to maintain more room. It's like an arch that has more pieces, a bridge that has more height will have more room for the tongue, and this will help prevent sleep apnea and airway issues as you get older. So if that 4-year-old has to go to a practitioner that can have a treatment plan for all those 52 teeth, not just for 28 teeth or 24 teeth, like an orthodontist that gets a 12-year-old into their chair. This forwardontic practitioner will see a child at 4 and have a plan to keep all those teeth healthy in its own room, in its space, and figure out how to get a jaw that will be big enough to house all those teeth and the tongue, so that the tongue doesn't have to partially live in the throat. If all the teeth are there, then the tongue will live in the mouth and be away from the throat, which is what we talked about, the airway. So that tube will be free to allow air to bring oxygen to the lungs.